The Last Goodbye, A Mother's Final Choice. Chapter 1, The Phone Call That Changed Everything. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed their eternal indifferent song as I lay in bed number 7, cardiac intensive care unit. My chest bore the angry red scar of emergency surgery, a vertical line that split my breastbone, a reminder that I had died 3 times before they managed to anchor my soul back into this failing body. 3 times. 3 times my heart had stopped beating in that ambulance. 3 times the paramedics had shocked me back to life with those electric paddles I'd only ever seen on television. And 3 times, somewhere across the city, my sons, my own flesh and blood, were arranging champagne flutes and discussing seating charts. The doctor's words still echoed in the hollow chambers of my mind, bouncing off the walls of disbelief like a rubber ball in an empty room. Mrs. Stone, I need you to understand the gravity of what happened. You were clinically dead for 4 minutes. 4 minutes without oxygen to your brain. We're calling this a miracle. A miracle. What a strange word to use for a woman whose sons couldn't be bothered to leave a birthday party while she fought death itself. Dr. Richard Miller had been my physician for the past 15 years. He was a man in his late 50s with greying temples and eyes that had witnessed too much human suffering to ever fully smile again. When he had entered my room at 9:47 p.m, I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock, counting seconds, waiting for them to arrive. His face had carried an expression I'd never seen before. Not pity, not sympathy, something darker, something that looked almost like anger. "Mrs. Stone," he had said, pulling up a chair beside my bed with a heaviness that made the plastic creak, "I need to talk to you about the phone calls." "Phone calls?" My voice had been barely a whisper then, my throat still raw from the intubation tube they'd removed only hours before. "I called both of your sons at 2:15 p.m, immediately after we got you stabilised from surgery. I explained, very clearly I might add, that you had suffered a massive myocardial infarction, that you had arrested 3 times, that the next 24 hours were critical and that, frankly, we weren't sure you would survive the night." He had paused then, his jaw working as if he were physically chewing on words he didn't want to swallow. "The first one, Isaac, I believe, told me that they were hosting an important celebration. His exact words were, 'Doctor, my mother has always been strong. She's recovered from everything. My wife has been planning this party for months, and we have guests arriving from out of state. We simply cannot abandon our responsibilities. We'll come see her tomorrow after everything is wrapped up.' The machine monitoring my heart rate had begun to beat faster, erratically, as rage flooded through my veins like liquid fire. "And Benjamin?" I had asked, though part of me already knew, part of me had always known. Dr. Miller's expression had darkened further. "Benjamin told me that his wife, Diana, had organised everything weeks in advance, that the catering was already paid for, that over 50 guests had confirmed their attendance. He said, and I quote, 'My mother is a survivor. She's made it through worse. One more night won't make a difference.' One more night won't make a difference." And as if my life were a Netflix subscription they could pause and resume at their convenience. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Stone," Dr. Miller had said, and the genuine compassion in his voice had almost broken me. "I've been practicing medicine for 32 years. I've made hundreds, probably thousands of these calls. I've never, and I mean never, had family members refuse to come to the hospital when I've told them their loved one might not survive the night. After he left, I had lain there in the darkness, listening to the symphony of hospital sounds, the beeping of monitors, the whisper of ventilators in nearby rooms, the soft squeaking of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors, and I had finally allowed myself to see the truth I'd been avoiding for decades. I was alone. Not just physically alone in that moment, though the empty chair beside my bed spoke volumes. I was existentially, profoundly alone, in a way that had nothing to do with proximity and everything to do with value. To my children, I had become a checkbox on their to-do list, squeezed between pick up dry cleaning and schedule car maintenance. How had it come to this? Chapter 2: The Architecture of Sacrifice. Memory is a cruel architect. It builds monuments to moments we'd rather forget and tears down the temples of joy we desperately want to preserve. As I lay in that hospital bed, my body weak but my mind painfully sharp, I found myself walking through the blueprints of my own life, examining the foundation I had laid, stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice. 40 years earlier, I had been Cecilia Rosewood, 26 years old, pregnant with my second child, married to Robert Stone, a man whose surname I still carried like a scar. We lived in a small house on Lakeside Avenue, the kind of neighbourhood where everyone knew everyone's business and privacy was as rare as silence. Robert had worked at the Henderson textile factory, operating machinery that turned raw cotton into the fabric of other people's lives. He would come home every evening smelling of industrial soap and cotton dust, his hands rough as sandpaper, his eyes already looking past me towards something I could never quite identify, perhaps a life he felt he deserved but would never have. I remember the exact moment I knew our marriage was ending. It was a Tuesday evening in March, unseasonably cold. Isaac was 2 years old, running around the house in his dinosaur pajamas, and I was 8 months pregnant with Benjamin, so swollen I could barely see my own feet. I had made Robert's favourite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the recipe I'd learned from his own mother, and I'd set the table with our wedding china, trying to create some semblance of celebration in our increasingly threadbare life. He had looked at that meal, at me, at little Isaac, who was babbling excitedly about his day at daycare, and his face had crumpled with something that looked like despair. "I can't do this, Cece," he had said quietly, using the nickname he'd given me during our courtship, back when his voice still carried tenderness. "I'm 30 years old. I work 60 hours a week at a job I hate. I come home to screaming kids and bills I can't pay, and when I look ahead, all I see is more of the same. Just more. Forever." "What are you saying?" I had asked, though I already knew. Women always know. "I'm saying I need to leave. I need to find out who I am before I'm just this." He had gestured vaguely at our life, at me, at Isaac, encompassing everything and dismissing it all in one careless wave. He left that night, took a duffel bag with some clothes, his guitar, which he never played, and a photo of himself from college, notably not a photo of us, not a photo of Isaac. Just himself, alone, young, still believing the world owed him something better than what he'd chosen. Wank. The divorce papers arrived 6 weeks later, delivered by a man in a brown uniform who had no idea he was handing me the death certificate of my dreams. Robert signed away his parental rights as easily as one might sign a credit card receipt. The child support payments, when they came at all, were sporadic and meagre, little more than guilt money dropped into a mailbox from a distance, safe enough to avoid accountability. I was 26 years old, pregnant, with a toddler, and suddenly, terrifyingly alone. But I wasn't alone for long, because 3 weeks after Robert left, Benjamin decided he was ready to meet this world, arriving 4 weeks early, as if he couldn't wait to complicate my life further. I gave birth in the charity ward of County General, surrounded by other women whose stories probably mirrored my own, women who had believed in love and found only the empty space it left behind. They placed Benjamin in my arms, this tiny wrinkled creature with Robert's nose and my stubborn chin, and I remember thinking, I will never let you down. I will never choose my own happiness over yours. I will be everything your father wasn't. That promise became my prison. Chapter 3, The Mathematics of Motherhood. If someone had told me then that love could be measured in hours, in dollars, in pieces of yourself systematically given away until nothing remained, I might have laughed. But 20 years later, I could have presented them with a detailed ledger of exactly what unconditional love costs. The first job I took was cleaning offices in the financial district. I would wake at 3:30 a.m., bundle both boys into their car seats, Isaac, grumpy and confused, Benjamin usually crying, and drive them to Mrs. Patterson's house 3 streets over. She was a widow in her 70s who charged me $5 a day to watch them, paid her from the $22 I earned scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans in buildings full of people who made more in an hour than I made in a week. By 7:30 a.m., I would be at Linda's Diner on 5th Street, tying on an apron covered in grease stains that never quite came out, forcing my face into a smile for customers who looked through me as if I were as invisible as the glass I filled with their water. I worked the breakfast and lunch rush, serving scrambled eggs and mediocre coffee to people who left dollar tips and didn't bother to say thank you. At 4 p.m. I would collect the boys from Mrs. Patterson, take them home, help Isaac with his homework, feed them dinner from whatever I could cobble together from the food bank donations and discount grocery store finds. Then, after they fell asleep, Isaac usually by 8 o'clock, Benjamin fighting unconsciousness until nearly 9 o'clock, I would sit at the old Singer sewing machine my mother had given me and begin my third job. I altered clothes for the women in our neighbourhood, took in waistlines for the ones who'd lost weight, let out seams for the ones who'd gained it, hemmed pants, replaced zippers, fixed tears in Sunday dresses. I charged $5 for simple jobs, $10 for complicated ones, and I worked until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped, usually until well past midnight. 3 hours of sleep, 21 hours of work, and in between, the constant, relentless mathematics of survival. Could we afford new shoes for Isaac when his toes pressed against the worn fabric of his sneakers? No. Stuff them with newspaper and make them last another 2 months. Could Benjamin have that chocolate milk he loved so much at the grocery store? Not this week. Water is free. Could I buy the name brand cereal instead of the tasteless generic version? Absolutely not. Luxuries are for people who can afford dreams. Every single decision was a calculation, a careful weighing of needs against the brutal reality of a bank account that never seemed to hold more than $200 at a time. But I never let them see me cry. I smile now thinking about that, about the incredible energy I expended maintaining the illusion that everything was fine, that we were fine, that I was fine. I would cry silently in the shower, letting the water wash away evidence of my despair. I would cry in my car during the 5-minute drive between the diner and Mrs. Patterson's house. I would cry sometimes at my sewing machine, tears falling onto fabric I was mending for someone else's life. But never in front of them, because I had promised myself that they would never feel the weight of their father's abandonment, that they would never believe they were a burden, that they would grow up knowing with absolute certainty that they were wanted, cherished, worth every sacrifice. It's funny how you can kill yourself trying to prove love, and the people you're proving it to never even notice you're dying. Chapter 4. The slow erosion of self. People talk about sacrifice as if it's a single noble act. Jesus on the cross, a soldier throwing himself on a grenade. But the real sacrifice, the kind that hollows you out and leaves you wondering who you used to be, happens in tiny increments. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one barely noticeable, until suddenly you're bleeding out and can't remember which cut was the fatal one. When Isaac turned 18 and got accepted to Whitmore University, a private school I could never afford in 3 lifetimes, he had come to me with those puppy dog eyes he'd mastered as a toddler. "Mum, I know it's expensive, but Whitmore has the best business program in the state. If I graduate from there, I'll get a good job immediately. I'll be able to pay you back everything. I promise. It's an investment in our future." Our future. Not his future, our future, as if my life was so completely entwined with his success that his achievements would somehow flow backward through time and validate all the years I'd spent barely surviving. The tuition was $32,000 a year. With room and board, books and fees, it would cost nearly $45,000 annually. I was making approximately $28,000 from all 3 of my jobs combined, working 100-hour weeks that left me so exhausted I sometimes fell asleep at red lights. "I'll take out loans," I had told him, signing my name to documents I barely understood, agreeing to payments that would extend well past my retirement, mortgaging my old age for his youth. 4 years later, when Benjamin was ready for college, I did it again. Because what else could I do? Tell one son I loved him enough to destroy myself financially, but the other would have to settle for community college. No. I took out more loans, worked more hours, stopped eating lunch to save money, wore shoes with holes in them until my feet bled. And they never knew. That was the thing. They never knew because I never told them. I had become so skilled at performing competence, at pretending everything was manageable, that they genuinely believed I was fine. That somehow, magically, their mother had enough money to pay for everything. That sacrifice wasn't actually sacrifice if the person making it smiled while they did it. Isaac graduated summa cum laude. I was so proud I thought my chest might burst. I attended his graduation ceremony in a dress I'd sewn myself from fabric I'd found on clearance, sitting in the back row of the auditorium, watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown. He collected his diploma, shook hands with the dean, and I waited for him to scan the crowd, to find my face, to acknowledge the woman who had made this moment possible. He never looked. Later at the reception, he had introduced me to his friends, his professors, his girlfriend Mila, a sleek, beautiful woman with perfectly manicured nails and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "This is my mum," he had said casually, "the way you might introduce someone to your dentist or your accountant." She worked really hard to help me get through school. Worked really hard. As if it had been a hobby, as if I hadn't literally sold years of my life, health and sanity to buy him that diploma. Mela had shaken my hand with 2 fingers, the kind of handshake you give to something you'd rather not touch, and said, "How nice! Isaac has told me so much about you." She hadn't told me what he'd said. Somehow, I already knew it wasn't good. Chapter 5. The Invasion of Daughters-in-Law. I've often wondered if there's a special kind of woman who sees a mother-in-law not as a person but as a competitor, someone to be defeated, displaced, and ultimately disappeared. If so, both my sons had found her. Mela arrived in Isaac's life like a beautiful storm, all practiced charm and strategic sweetness. She was 24 when they met, working in the marketing department of the company where Isaac had just been hired. She came from money, real money, the kind that builds generational wealth and winter homes in Aspen. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states. Her mother spent her days at the country club and her evenings at charity galas, where tickets cost more than I made in a month. To Mela, I was a reminder of everything Isaac had come from, everything she wanted him to forget. The first Christmas after they started dating, Isaac had called me 3 days before the holiday. "Mum, I need to talk to you about something." My heart had immediately clenched. Nothing good ever started with those words. Mela's family has this really important Christmas tradition. They always spend it at her parents' estate. It's this whole thing with extended family coming in from all over the country. Her mother has been planning it for months and, well, Mela really wants me there. "Oh," I had said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That sounds lovely. What time should I arrive Christmas Eve? I can bring my cranberry sauce. You always loved it." The silence on the other end of the phone had stretched so long, I thought we'd have been disconnected. "Actually, Mum, it's kind of their family thing. Mela thinks it might be awkward to bring outside people. She promised we'd see you right after Christmas, maybe the 27th. Outside people. I was outside people. "Of course," I had said, because what else could I say? The 27th is perfect. I spent Christmas Day alone for the first time in 58 years. I had cooked a small turkey breast anyway, out of habit, and sat at my table eating it while watching old movies on television. I called Linda to come keep me company, but she was with her own family. I understood. I didn't blame her. I blamed myself for raising a son who could abandon his mother on Christmas without apparently losing a moment's sleep over it. When Benjamin met Diana 2 years later, I had hoped it might be different. Diana was not from money. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a schoolteacher. She seemed down to earth, practical, someone who understood the value of family. I was wrong. Diana's strategy was more subtle than Mela's outright exclusion. She didn't ban me from events. She simply made me feel so uncomfortable attending them that I eventually stopped trying. "Oh, Cecilia, what an interesting blouse," she would say, her voice dripping with performative kindness. "It's so vintage. I love that you're not afraid to wear things from decades ago. It takes real confidence." Or, Benjamin and I were thinking of redecorating the living room. "We want something more modern, more sophisticated, not like that floral wallpaper your generation loves, but something clean and contemporary." Your generation. As if I were a relic from some ancient civilization, quaint but obsolete. The breaking point came at Benjamin's 33rd birthday party. Diana had organised an elaborate dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place where they don't list prices on the menu because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. I had arrived on time wearing my best dress, a dark blue number I'd sewn myself with pearl buttons I'd found at an estate sale. I thought I looked nice. I had even gone to a salon and had my hair done, spending money I couldn't really spare. When I walked into the restaurant, Diana's face had flickered with something that looked almost like disappointment. "Cecilia, you came," she had said, as if my attendance at my own son's birthday was somehow surprising. Throughout dinner I had been seated at the far end of the table next to Benjamin's colleague from work and his wife, both of whom spent the entire meal discussing people I didn't know and places I'd never been. Benjamin sat at the other end, surrounded by his friends, laughing loudly at jokes I couldn't hear. When the bill came, I glimpsed it accidentally when the waiter placed it on the table. It was over $1,200 for one meal. I had felt physically sick. Benjamin had paid it without flinching, pulling out a credit card and signing the receipt with a flourish, accepting congratulations from his friends for throwing such an amazing party. On the drive home, I had taken 2 buses to get there and would take 2 buses back. I had cried so hard I missed my stop and had to walk an extra 6 blocks in shoes that pinched my feet. That was when I first understood. I had raised men who valued appearances over substance, who measured worth in dollar signs, who had learned to be embarrassed by the woman who had sacrificed everything so they could become the kind of people who spent $1,200 on a single dinner. Chapter 6. The House That Love Built and Greed Destroyed. The house on Willow Street was small, just under 1,200 square feet, but it was mine. Well, it had been mine, paid off through 30 years of mortgage payments that I'd never once missed, not even during the darkest periods after Robert left. It was a 1950s bungalow with white aluminum siding that needed painting, a front porch with a swing that creaked in the wind, and a backyard just big enough for the boys to play in when they were young. The kitchen was outdated, with avocado green appliances from the 1970s that still worked perfectly. The bathroom had pink tile that was laughably retro but clean and functional. In that house, I had marked the boys' heights on the doorframe of the hallway closet every year on their birthdays, 2 columns of pencil marks climbing upwards like evidence of time passing, of childhood lived, of love measured in inches. In that house, Isaac had taken his first steps, toddling from the couch to the coffee table with his arms outstretched, his face split into a grin of pure triumph. In that house, Benjamin had learned to ride his bike in the driveway, me running alongside him, holding the seat, his voice high with excitement. "Don't let go, Mommy! Don't let go!" In that house, we had weathered storms, literal ones that knocked out power for days, and metaphorical ones that threatened to drown us in debt and despair. It wasn't much, but it was everything to me. When Isaac called that Tuesday evening in April, his voice had carried an unusual brightness, an excitement I hadn't heard since he was a child on Christmas morning. "Mom, we found it! The house, the perfect house." "That's wonderful, honey," I had said, genuinely happy for him. He and Mila had been looking for months, attending open houses every weekend, scrolling through listings on their laptops. "It's in Riverside Estates. Do you know it? It's that new development on the north side. Mum, the house is incredible. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops, hardwood floors throughout. There's even a 3-car garage. It sounds beautiful. I'm so happy for you both." "There's just one thing." His voice had shifted, becoming careful, calculated. "The down payment is $100,000. $100,000. I had earned approximately $35,000 the previous year. "We've been saving," he continued quickly, "but we only have about $40,000. The sellers won't budge on the price, and if we don't put down at least 20%, the mortgage payment will be too high, even with both our salaries." I had remained silent, waiting, knowing what was coming. "Mum, I know this is huge to ask, but is there any way you could help us with the down payment? It would be a loan, obviously. We'd pay you back with interest. The house is going to appreciate like crazy. Riverside Estates is the hottest neighborhood in the city right now. In 5 years, this place will probably be worth double what we're paying for it." "Isaac, honey, I don't have that kind of money. You know "But you have the house," he had interrupted. "Your house is worth at least $150,000, maybe more. You could sell it, give us the down payment and still have money left over for a nice apartment. Actually, it would probably be better for you. No more yard work, no more repairs. Those old houses are money pits anyway. My house. The house where I had raised him. The house that held every memory of his childhood. The house that was my security, my safety net, the only asset I had in a life of financial precarity. Isaac, Mum, please. His voice had cracked, becoming the voice of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared. This is our chance. Mella's parents live in Riverside Estates. If we don't buy this house, we're going to have to move to some suburb 40 minutes away. Mela is already stressed about it. She keeps saying I'm not ambitious enough, that I'm not providing the lifestyle she's used to. And there it was, not his dream, Mela's dream. Mela's expectations, Mela's judgment. Let me think about it, I had said, even though I already knew what I would do. Because I always knew what I would do. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers selling my house to a young couple expecting their first child. They walked through the rooms, excited, planning where they would put the nursery, how they would update the kitchen. They didn't know that every room held ghosts of the life I had built there. The realtor had handed me a check for $142,000, less than I'd hoped after realtor fees and closing costs. I had given Isaac $60,000 for his down payment, used another $15,000 to pay off the remaining balance on my credit cards and car loan, put the rest into savings. I moved into a 600 square foot apartment on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator. The apartment smelled like old cooking oil and defeat. The carpet was stained with mysteries I didn't want to identify. The windows looked out onto an alley where people threw their garbage and stray cats fought over scraps. But Isaac had his house. Isaac and Mela had their 4-bedroom palace with granite countertops and a 3-car garage. The first time I visited them, calling 3 days in advance because Mela had instituted a rule about unannounced visits, I had stood on their massive front porch, clutching a chocolate cake I'd baked specially for them, and rung the doorbell. Mela had answered, her face flickering with something like annoyance before settling into a tight smile. Cecilia, you're here. You should have called. We're actually expecting company for dinner in about an hour. She hadn't invited me in. I stood there on the porch of the house I had helped buy, holding a cake, being told I wasn't welcome. I brought this for you, I had said, holding out the cake. It's chocolate with raspberry filling, Isaac's favourite since he was 8 years old. She had taken it with 2 hands, holding it away from her body. How sweet! Although we're actually trying to eat healthier these days. Isaac's cholesterol came back a little high at his last checkup, so we're cutting out desserts. But this was thoughtful. I had walked back to my car, a 13-year-old Honda with a failing transmission, and sat behind the wheel for 15 minutes before I could trust myself to drive. I had sold my home, the only thing I truly owned in this world, to help my son buy a house where I wasn't welcome. And somehow, I was supposed to be grateful he'd given me the opportunity. Chapter 7. The business that wasn't. If Isaac had taken my house, Benjamin took my future. It started, like all disasters, with hope. Benjamin had always been the dreamer of my 2 sons. Where Isaac was calculated and pragmatic, Benjamin saw possibilities, opportunities, the shimmering mirage of success always just beyond the horizon. He had graduated with a degree in business, worked for 3 years in sales at a regional electronics distributor, and then, at age 28, decided he was destined for more. I asked, "Mom, I need to talk to you about something exciting," he had said over coffee at a Starbucks near his apartment. Neutral territory, I would later realise, chosen specifically so I couldn't make a scene. "What is it, honey?" His eyes had been bright, almost feverish with enthusiasm. "I'm going to start my own company. Import electronics from overseas, phones, laptops, tablets, and sell them directly to consumers online. Cut out the middleman. Mom, the profit margins are insane. I've done all the research. I've been working on this business plan for months." I had smiled, happy to see him passionate about something. "That sounds wonderful, Benjamin. I'm so proud of you for having ambition." "There's just one thing." He had stirred his coffee nervously, not meeting my eyes. "I need start-up capital. About $50,000 to get everything off the ground. Inventory, website development, licensing, initial marketing. $50,000. I had $32,000 in my savings account. Every penny I'd managed to save from the sale of my house after giving Isaac his down payment. Money I had earmarked for my retirement, for emergencies, for the inevitable medical expenses that come with aging. "Benjamin, I don't have that much." I know. I'm not asking you for the whole amount. I've got investors lined up for most of it, but they want to see that I have skin in the game, that my family believes in me enough to invest. If you could just lend me $28,000, I could get this off the ground. And Mom, I'm talking about paying you back in 6 months, probably with 20% interest. This is going to explode. I'll be able to pay you back everything you've ever given me, for college, for life, everything. Everything you've ever given me. As if my love, my time, my sacrifice could be reduced to a dollar amount that he could pay back with interest and consider the debt settled. I should have said no. Any rational person would have said no. But I was his mother, and he was my baby. And he looked at me with such hope, such certainty that this time, finally, things would work out for him. "Okay," I had said, "but Benjamin, this is everything I have. This is my security. If something happens to me, this money is the difference between being okay and being desperate." "Nothing is going to happen to you, Mom. You're strong as an ox. And nothing is going to happen to the business either. I promise. 6 months, and you'll have your money back with interest." I had withdrawn the money the next day, $28,000 in a cashier's check that represented 10 years of careful saving, of denying myself small pleasures, of choosing canned vegetables over fresh generic brands over name brands, walking instead of driving to save gas money. Benjamin had hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe, thanking me over and over, promising this was going to change everything. He was right about that last part. The business, Data Streamline Direct, he had called it, lasted exactly 74 days. 74 days from the moment he signed the lease on a small warehouse space to the moment he called me, his voice hollow with defeat, to tell me it was over. The problems had been numerous. The overseas suppliers he'd found had sent inferior products. The website he'd paid a developer $8,000 to create had constant glitches that drove away customers. The marketing strategy he'd been so confident about had reached almost no one. And perhaps most devastatingly, 3 weeks after he launched, a major online retailer had slashed their prices on the exact same products he was selling, making his markup completely uncompetitive. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he had said when he came to my apartment to deliver the news in person. "The business folded. I lost everything, the inventory, the warehouse deposit, all of it." "And my money?" I had asked, though I already knew. Gone, all of it. I barely have enough left to cover the debts I owe to other people, but, Mum, I'll pay you back, I swear. It'll take me a while, but I'll do it. That had been 3 years ago. I had received exactly one payment, $500, 6 months after the business failed. After that, silence. No mention of repayment, no acknowledgement of debt. Just an unspoken agreement that we would both pretend it never happened. Diana, when I had mentioned it once at Sunday dinner, had actually laughed. "Cecilia, you can't seriously expect Benjamin to pay back money you gave him for a business venture. That's not how investments work. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You should have known the risk when you wrote the cheque." Written the cheque. As if it had been disposable income, fun money I'd had lying around, not the carefully hoarded savings of a woman who knew exactly how fragile financial security could be. After the business failed, I had started taking extra shifts wherever I could find them. At 63 years old, with arthritis in my hands and knees that ached in the cold, I had worked retail jobs during the holidays, cleaned houses on weekends, anything to rebuild the cushion I'd lost. I managed to save $8,000 over the next 3 years. $8,000 out of the $28,000 I'd lost. Benjamin never paid me back a single additional penny. But he had enough money to take Diana to Hawaii for their anniversary, to buy a new truck, to spend $1,200 on a dress for his wife's birthday party. While I climbed 4 flights of stairs every day because I couldn't afford an apartment with an elevator. Chapter 8 completed the slow fade. The end began subtly with Diana. "You know, Cecilia," she said one Sunday as she gently wiped imaginary crumbs from the table, "Sundays are really the only day Benjamin and I have to rest. The work week is exhausting, and then there are errands, social obligations. It's a lot." I smiled, though something in my chest tightened. "I understand, dear. We can move dinner to every other Sunday." She exchanged a glance with Benjamin, the kind of look married couples share when they've already discussed something privately. "Well," she continued, her voice syrupy sweet, "we were thinking it might be easier if we just did dinner. Occasionally. You know, when it works for everyone. Occasionally." That word ended a tradition built over 3 decades. The next Sunday came and went in silence. Then another. Then a month. When I finally called Benjamin, he sounded distracted. "Mum, things are just really busy right now. Diana's parents are visiting. We'll catch up soon, okay?" Soon never came. Isaac faded faster. After moving into the Riverside Estates house, the house I had sacrificed my own for, his calls became shorter, less frequent, more transactional. "Hey, Mum, can't talk long." "Hey, Mum, we're hosting people." "Hey, Mum, we'll reschedule." Eventually, even rescheduling stopped. Holidays became optional. Birthdays became text messages. My existence became background noise. I stopped cooking large meals. Stopped buying ingredients for dishes no one would eat. Stopped setting extra places at the table. One night I caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. Older, smaller somehow, folded inward like a woman trying not to take up space in her own life. That was when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't missed. Chapter 9, the diagnosis. The chest pain started as a whisper. A dull pressure I ignored because I had ignored worse. A tightening I explained away as indigestion, stress, age. Women like me don't rush to hospitals. We wait, we endure, we minimize. It wasn't until the pain spread down my left arm and my vision blurred that I finally called 911. The rest came in fragments: sirens, voices, oxygen masks, darkness. Death found me 3 times that day, and each time it let me go, but my sons did not come. Husband, while machines shocked life back into my body, my sons toasted birthdays, laughed over wine, posed for photographs that would later appear online, with captions like "so grateful for family." I stared at my phone that night, waiting. No calls, no messages, no missed notifications. That was the moment something inside me finally, quietly died for good. Not my heart, my hope. Chapter 10. The Choice. The morning after surgery, Dr. Miller sat beside my bed again. "Mrs. Stone," he said carefully, "your heart is severely weakened. You're alive, yes, but this won't be the last emergency. You need peace. You need rest. You need to stop giving more than you have." I laughed, a dry, humourless sound. "I don't know how to do that." He studied me for a long moment. "Then learn," he said softly, "before there's nothing left of you to save." That afternoon I made phone calls, not to my sons, to a lawyer. Over the next 2 weeks I rewrote everything. My will, my beneficiaries, my end-of-life directives. I sold what little I owned and moved into a quiet, assisted living community near the coast. Nothing fancy, but clean, calm, filled with people who smiled when they saw me. I stopped calling first, stopped apologizing, stopped explaining. And something strange happened. The silence hurt, but it also healed. Chapter 11. The Last Goodbye. 3 months later I felt it. The deep, unmistakable knowing that this was the end. I wasn't afraid. I wrote 2 letters, one for Isaac, one for Benjamin. Not accusations, not pleas, truth. I told them I loved them, that I had always loved them, that everything I had done was out of love, but that love should never have required self-destruction. I told them I forgave them, and then finally I said goodbye. I passed quietly in my sleep as the sun rose over the ocean, light spilling across the walls like a benediction. Epilogue. What they learned too late. They came when it was over. Stood beside a bed that no longer needed machines. Cried over a woman who could no longer hear apologies. At the reading of the will, confusion turned to shock. Everything I had left, what little remained, had been donated. To women's shelters, to single mothers, to scholarships for girls who had dreams but no safety net. The lawyer read my final words aloud. To my sons, I gave you everything while I lived. Now I give what remains to those who still need saving. Love should never cost a woman her life. They wept. But grief, like gratitude, means little when it arrives too late. Final line for YouTube story ending. Some mothers don't die of illness. They die of giving everything to people who never learned how to give back. If you want next. They cried at her funeral, but she cried alone while she was still alive.